Hey folks, today my secret sauce is about digging into daunting embroidery digitizing, and you know the situation, right? Avoidance tactics aside, you know you're going to have to digitize the design that's in front of you. Your customer's text said they're figuring out a full back embroidery. You hoped it might be big, but otherwise uncomplicated. But your hopes got dashed. Dominated by tiny details, gradients, contours, and tiny text, you're staring down well over 300 square centimeters of excruciating detail, and it's no surprise that the hours of unblinking effort in your future can make you feel a little bit of dread. No matter how many years I spent salvaging jobs like this when other shops wouldn't take into difficult design, I always feel a drag on my determination when I see this time consuming stuff in front of me. For those who assume it's some special inborn quality that makes you able to grind away at these things, these gargantuan works bother all of us, and there's a truth behind it that should come with a little bit of comfort. Anyone who can do a small and similarly detailed piece can easily conquer these larger pieces. Skill makes it possible to digitize, but to take on large and difficult pieces requires a systematic approach. If you can rationally analyze your design, partition it into these actionable subtasks or sub design elements, and take some repeated measured actions toward the completion despite that internal resistance, uh, you can overcome daunting, large, or overly detailed designs. Despite that initial reluctance, a process based approach and perseverance will let you make progress on any outsized or outwardly difficult digitizing project. Let's start with analysis, right? So, the first step in any embroidery should be the careful assessment of your customer's expectations. You got to know the desired design size, garment specs, their willingness to compromise, when you have to make changes, and you have to have a solid sense of what's most important to the customer. All pertinent details from that initial interview come into play when you're analyzing the art. Examine the design carefully, imagining the stitched surface of the final decoration with all of this in mind. The thing is, your core decisions are going to be made now long before you digitize. How many and which colors to use, whether or not you're going to use applique or specialty materials, where the design and the individual elements need to shift, where they need to start and finish in sequence, what details must be altered, removed, or replaced. These things should be explored before you ever set a single stitch. So I like to look for what I call obstacles and opportunities, right? So note obstacles, areas with difficulties, gradients, overly dense detail, small elements that won't stitch cleanly, places that are likely to distort, thin outlines that require tight registration, as well as opportunities, areas where applique can cut down stitch count and density, symmetrical elements, repeated stuff, which we're going to talk about again in a second. Things that can be digitized and reused, text can be executed with keyboard fonts instead of doing them manually. Know where you're going to be fighting the design and where the structure might save you some time. Then you got to start stacking up solutions. Match your catalog of obstacles with potential solutions. Note which details are essential and which can be removed following from these customer notes, or requesting clarification as necessary from the customer, especially with these really difficult designs. Determine how tiny text can be reorganized into more open lines, upscaled without damaging the look of the design, or a typeface change might render it more legible at size. Look up previous files in which you handled similar challenges to those in the design if you're kind of confused on where to start. Be ready to show your customer this arsenal of ideas to justify detail changes, alteration of details, and any other corrections. If you can address the additions in the design and get buy in for the customer on them, you can be confident in your choices and reduce the nagging doubts about the approval or the need to rework your digitizing, which is really where you start to lose time. Next, we kind of deal with parsing the design. Break the design up into workable pieces, right? So, parsing, it's key to making any large piece feel more manageable. You only have to convince yourself to stay on task long enough to take one element on at a time. This provides natural breaks and a way to easily gauge your progress as you work, as well as reducing your natural resistance to the huge task at hand. It's much easier to commit to 15 minutes than a week of any sort of task, after all. More often than not, once you've gotten past the initial resistance, you'll hit a flow state that will have you working longer and more engaged fashion. So, what we need to do when we're starting to get this going on and really digging is to visualize the sequence first. Start by visualizing the sequence of stitching for both sensible, efficient sewing and proper overlapping in texture. Your obstacles and opportunities kind of analysis will help you to reveal areas that might need extra attention, such as those requiring that tight registration, special orders of colors for certain types of shading, or those pieces that could save effort through symmetry or repetition or copying and pasting. Um, this will guide you in parsing your design to these sub designs that you can execute along the path to the finished piece. There's some benefits to breaking up designs, right? Uh, Beyond the aforementioned stopping points and the progress checks, they can actually have functional benefits for stitching. If you've got areas that have really tight registration, that have underlying filled elements, you can complete them as a unit or in quadrants or in areas of the design. Sometimes stitching everything that's in an isolated area can help it stay more tightly in registration as you don't move away from the existing element and move back, letting the design warp, stretch, and the material move in between these parts of the stitching sequence. Sometimes completing that single area before moving on, even if it means additional color changes from revisiting those colors, can keep you from that higher risk of losing registration the longer and further you travel from the initial stitching. So, if you outline letters on an unstable hat, you really know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you just have to drop that fill, drop the outline at the same time, move, and just suffer the consequences of a couple of extra color changes because the stresses of embroidery on an unstable span, especially when we're talking about big jacket backs like this, which sometimes can be hard to hoop, can cause considerable shifts in position when we move around in the hoop too much. Next thing, that's symmetry we talked about. We want to seek symmetry. Designs that feature symmetry or repetition really parse easily. If something is the same on both sides that has bilateral symmetry, that can sometimes be created by executing one half, then mirroring and reproducing the results. One can even create one multicolor element repeating set and later condense the number of colors by resequencing and digitizing connecting stitches for each thread color when you go. Um, Copies can be placed in their proper location and then resequenced. It's not always a solution we can use, but sometimes it can really save labor and enhance a design sense of internal continuity when there's some variation otherwise that could creep up. Uh, Next is execution, right? So, with careful analysis, digitizing, actually getting into the drawing of the elements is not as difficult as it is just tiring. The hardest part is maintaining focus throughout the process once those decisions are made. You'll encounter areas that make you reverse earlier decisions, but these new obstacles become side trips on the established roadmap put into place by that analysis you've already done. When you're encountering such a reversion, save to a new separate file before you make changes. Make versioned files. Trust me, you'll be happy you did. Stop and define the new obstacle, decide on your solution, and plow forward. With an unassailable backup file in place, you can experiment, digitize throwaway elements to test theories, separate an element from the design and tweak it, or return to your earlier work if all else fails. Take advantage of the inherently digital nature of our work by saving multiple versions of your file and allowing yourself to play with new solutions. Uh, don't be romantic about the work you've already done. Unfortunately, we have to kill our darlings. These things cannot be sacred. If you have to rework or eliminate an element to move forward, save a new file, cut it away, and go. If you remember your overall path, you'll be able to pick up the trail once you solve the problem. Save often, take breaks as needed, and dive back in. And to finish this kind of up, we need to start thinking about how we're going to make this work. First, we replay and revise. You got to do what I like to call the pre flight. With digitizing done either on a sub design of the entire piece, it makes sense to replay your designs. So, sampling monster designs is time consuming. Make sure you use your slow replays, your film strip mode, whatever sort of design that is called, or whatever sort of tool that's called in your design software. Replay that file and watch it stitch digitally. It's your time to find accidental copy paste errors, poor placement of start and stop points, and to identify places you could travel under a later element for pathing and stitching rather to stop and trim and jump. Gross errors are easy to see at this stage. You'll see your copy paste errors. You'll see things where you have bad colors and sequencing. You'll see things that are completely out of place. Have a method to take notes handy and identify the areas you'll need to address. Review, identify, repair, and repeat. It's better to catch these flaws now than in hour two of a 4 hour round of stitch outs. Uh, Lastly, stitch and evaluate, right? With all of this careful work, it can seem like stopping even a single head's production or full sample is a waste. But trust me, wasting a multi head run of garments is a much worse thing than wasting the time. Ask me how I know. Always run your design on materials analogous to the intended garments, so something that's very much like it, especially with something that is expensive and time consuming. The color, the fiber, the weave, and the stabilizers should match in your sampling material, especially with these heavier or complicated designs, because they just need to be exactly what you're going to run on so you know that the stitch out is going to match the result on the actual garment. Evaluate that first stitch out and go through the same editing and sampling process if you find major flaws. And frankly, at the end, you're just going to have to do it again. You can be forgiven for feeling like this article is mostly common sense, right? As much as I agree, I've counseled so many digitizers struggling with large pieces that were stuck on one of these common sense steps that I still think it's useful. And honestly, even I am reminded of things while I'm reading this out to you. The only real medicine to make you less likely to struggle with large and difficult pieces is repetition. Each attempt generates experience, knowledge, and confidence. Uh, Take the risk, revise and repair, and use the lessons that you've learned to fuel your next large format embroidery adventure, shall we say. Let's call it that. These pieces may always feel challenging, but conquering one of these massive designs can prove your capacity to take on pieces of considerable scale in the future and help you reduce that dread. And that's my secret sauce for today.